On May 29, 2005, 18-year-old Natalie Holloway set out to make the most of her last day in Aruba, planning to create unforgettable memories. However, what was meant to be the perfect end to her trip quickly turned into a nightmare when Natalie vanished from the vibrant Caribbean island, famed for its popular tourist attractions. Known for its stunning beaches like Eagle Beach and Palm Beach, Aruba appeared to be a paradise. But for Natalie and others like her, it tragically became their final resting place. Natalie Holloway was born on October 21, 1986, in Clinton, Mississippi. Later, she moved to Mountain Brook, Alabama. As the eldest of two siblings with a younger brother named Matthew, Natalie was raised in a loving and close-knit family. Her parents, Beth and David, were high school sweethearts who married in the 1980s but separated in 1993 after 13 years of marriage. Despite the divorce, David remained actively involved in his children's lives. In 2000, Beth remarried George "Jug" Twitty, a businessman from Alabama, and the family moved to Mountain Brook. Natalie thrived in this supportive environment, excelling academically and participating in various extracurricular activities. She was excited to celebrate her high school graduation with a trip before starting her pre-med studies at the University of Alabama, where she had earned a full scholarship. Although her parents were initially hesitant, they ultimately supported her decision to take the trip, unaware of the tragic events that would soon unfold. Natalie Holloway was eager to make the most of her trip to Aruba and thrilled about the adventure. On May 26, 2005, she, along with 125 of her Mountain Brook High School classmates and 7 chaperones, arrived on the Caribbean island. The group stayed at the Holiday Inn, and soon after arriving, the students were allowed to explore the island independently. Natalie and her friends spent the next few days sunbathing, snorkeling, and enjoying the local nightlife. It was her first time experiencing legal drinking, which she embraced. The group frequently visited popular spots like the nightclub Carlos and Charlie's and the Excelsior Casino, both near their hotel. On May 29, 2005, the last day of their trip, Natalie and her friends were at the casino near a blackjack table when they encountered a Dutch tourist named Joran van der Sloot. Joran, a visiting student from the Netherlands, introduced himself to Natalie, and they quickly hit it off. His group planned to head to Carlos and Charlie's, and they invited Joran to join them. Just before closing time, Joran arrived at the club and offered Natalie some drinks at the back bar, which she accepted. Unbeknownst to her, one of the drinks had been spiked with a substance known as Liquid X, a colorless, odorless drug that requires only a few drops to render the victim disoriented and unable to remember what happens next. As the drug began to take effect, Natalie felt increasingly ill. Joran concocted a story about a shark sighting near the lighthouse and convinced Natalie to come with him to the beach. He led her to a silver-gray Honda parked outside the club, where his friend Deepak was driving, and his brother Satish sat in the front seat. Natalie's friends saw her leave with the stranger, but they did not intervene. This would be the last time anyone would see Natalee Holloway. By the morning of May 30th, 2005, when the Mountain Brook students were preparing to board their flight home, Natalee was missing. Beth received a devastating call that her daughter hadn't shown up for the flight. In a panic, Beth boarded a private jet owned by a friend and arrived in Aruba within 12 hours. She immediately went to the local police station to report Natalee's disappearance, urging them to begin an investigation. Beth insisted on reviewing security footage from the casino with the manager, which revealed that Natalee had left the club with Joran. Investigations uncovered that Joran was a known regular at Aruba's casinos, involved in gambling, drug use, and other questionable activities. He lived in a guest house on his family's property and had a reputation for targeting women on their last night in Aruba, isolating them from their friends, drugging them, and assaulting them at his guest house. Despite numerous allegations of aggravated assault, Joran had never faced consequences, as his well-crafted plans left little evidence. Around 3 a.m. the next day, Beth convinced the police to take her to the Van der Sloot residence. There, she met Joran's father, Paul van der Sloot, who immediately denied any connection between his son and the case. Joran, along with Deepak and Satish, joined the conversation. When Beth confronted them, Joran claimed they had only gone for a few drinks and dropped Natalee off at her hotel. Paul, a local judicial official, intervened, advising his son to stop engaging with Beth, using his position to protect Joran and buy time to eliminate any evidence. The police offered minimal assistance, leaving Beth no choice but to return to the station. Hotel security footage later disproved Joran's claims, showing no sign of Natalee being dropped off. By this point, Natalee's father, David, had arrived in Aruba to join the search. Despite 48 hours passing since Natalee's disappearance, the police hesitated to consider Joran a suspect, repeatedly assuring the family that Natalee would soon be found. As the public pressure mounted, investigators finally questioned Joran and the Kalpoe brothers. Initially, Joran and the brothers claimed they had taken Natalee to the California lighthouse to watch sharks before dropping her off at the hotel around 2 a.m. on May 30, 2005. However, discrepancies in their stories led to the eventual arrest of the three suspects, as the search for Natalee continued without yielding significant clues. On June 26th, Satish Kalpoe admitted to lying to the police during his initial questioning. He later changed his statement, claiming that he and Deepak had dropped off Joran and Natalee at the hotel, which was the last time they saw her. Meanwhile, a gardener from the Aruba Racket Club provided a sworn statement, claiming to have seen the three men in a car near the club around 2 a.m., contradicting the Kalpoe brothers' earlier assertion that they were already home by that time. As the case continued to unravel with conflicting testimonies and no sign of Natalee, the Aruba Police Department, Dutch Marines, FBI agents, and thousands of local volunteers searched every corner of the area, though only on land. Finally, on June 25th, a group of volunteers deployed divers and sonar equipment in hopes of finding any evidence. 6 weeks after Natalee's disappearance, her family offered a $200,000 reward for her safe return and $100,000 for any information leading to the case's resolution. By the end of July, the reward was raised to $1 million for Natalee's safe return. Beth stayed in Aruba for 2 full months, leaving just a week before the Kalpoe brothers, who had previously been released, were rearrested on August 26th. The brothers, along with Joran, were released again on September 3. In late August, divers from the ARUBA search team and the Rescue Foundation returned to the search after receiving a tip about a radar machine detecting human bones about a mile off the coast, but they found nothing. In March 2006, 10 months after Natalie's disappearance, ARUBA authorities reported that witnesses had stated the teenager had been drinking heavily that night and had cocaine in her possession, though no one claimed to have seen her using it. Authorities believe that Natalie might have entered a state of shock, experiencing a severe reaction due to the combination of alcohol and possibly other drugs, either taken voluntarily or administered to her. This could have caused her to collapse, leading search teams to believe she had died. Consequently, efforts were focused on the beach where Duran claimed to have last seen her and a nearby salt lagoon, where they searched for forensic evidence. Throughout the investigation, Duran's story kept changing. He seemed intrigued by the media attention and used it to his advantage, frequently contacting news outlets with claims of new evidence, often attempting to extort money for fabricated leads. Duran van der Sloot was born on August 6, 1987, in Arnhem, Netherlands. He was known as an honor student and a tennis star at the International School of ARUBA. His father, a lawyer, was in the process of becoming a judge at the time of Natalie's disappearance. One of Natalie's close friends remembered her first impression of Duran, noting his height and thinking it was odd that he was hanging out with their group. Despite her initial observations, she did not immediately suspect him. Duran was quickly identified by a Holiday Inn employee as a regular who often targeted young female tourists. He spent 3 months in jail but was released when a judge ruled that there was insufficient evidence to hold him. By the end of 2007, he and the Kalpoe brothers were arrested again, but once more, nothing came of it, and they were released. Duran later traveled freely across the world, spending time in Thailand and engaging in suspicious activities, though he managed to evade capture. He frequently discussed the case, seemingly relishing the notoriety it brought him. His temper was unpredictable. During an interview with Dutch crime reporter in January 2008, Duran threw a glass of wine at Peter when questioned about the credibility of his claims. In November 2008, CNN reported that ARUBA authorities had 2 new leads to investigate. One came from a witness who claimed to have seen Paulus van der Sloot on the night of May 29, 2005. He told police that while Paulus claimed to have been sleeping at home by 7 a.m. that night, his son was allegedly near a lagoon on the island at 4 a.m. on May 30, 2005. The witness mentioned seeing a young man, wet from the waist down and missing a shoe, running from the lagoon toward a fast food restaurant. Shortly after, the young man was joined by an older individual who drove by in a red Jeep about 10 minutes later. Another lead came from Duran's ex-girlfriend, who reported that Duran had once mentioned being on the beach with someone capable of disposing of a body. To aid the search, the family hired a private investigator who spent nearly a year knocking on every door in Aruba. On October 21, 2005, Natalie's birthday, they were at an Aruban landfill, digging through garbage when the deputy police chief suggested shifting their search to the sea. A recent break-in at a fisherman's hut had resulted in the theft of items like fishing traps and tools that could potentially be used to sink a body. A businessman who had been following the case offered to fund a search of the seabed. In November 2007, a ship named Persistent set out for Aruba. On December 24th, they discovered what appeared to be a fishing trap approximately 90 feet deep. On December 29th, a remotely operated vehicle was sent to investigate, and it detected what seemed to be a skull. On December 30th, a diver from the ship joined Aruba's police divers, but they found no evidence related to Natalie. Despite persistent new clues and witness statements, each lead seemed to result in a dead end. In early 2008, a man who identified himself as Marcos contacted Beth Holloway, claiming that drug traffickers had been paid to dispose of Natalie's body at sea, but had instead transported her remains to Nicaragua and buried them. The private investigator traveled to Nicaragua to meet Marcos, who agreed to use a GPS tracker to locate the remains. Later, Marcos called the private detective, claiming he had found Natalie, stating that her body was wrapped in a tarp and badly decomposed. Marcos advised the detective to inform Beth Holloway immediately. However, the detective chose not to make the call, fearing it would only give Beth false hope. Marcos disappeared shortly thereafter. In February 2010, Paulus van der Sloot, Joran's father, suddenly died of a heart attack, leaving his son in a precarious situation. A month later, Joran, using the alias Jet Sanders, contacted John Kelly, the Holloway family attorney, in a desperate state. In an email, he claimed to know where Natalie's body was and offered to help the family, but only for a price. Joran demanded $250,000 in exchange for revealing the location and details of what had happened to Natalie, stating that he now wanted to be truthful. His father was dead. He had nothing to hide and he wanted to help the family, but at a cost. After Beth Holloway authorized the payment, John Kelly arranged a meeting with Joran in Aruba, initially offering $25,000 up front. Joran claimed to know where Natalie's body was, but when asked what would happen if he wasn't paid, he allegedly responded coldly, suggesting Beth could wait another 5 years. The family then turned to the FBI for assistance. They devised a plan to trick Joran into thinking he was being paid, aiming to catch him committing wire fraud. During their meetings, John transferred $25,000 to Joran. Joran led John to a house near the ARUBA Racket Club, claiming that Natalie's remains were buried beneath freshly poured foundations before the house was built. He stated that on the night of Natalie's disappearance, they had argued on the beach, and in a fit of rage, he had thrown her, causing her to hit her head and die from blood loss. John doubted the truth of Joran's story, which suggested he initially hid the body on the beach with the help of his father before burying it. However, the house Joran pointed to hadn't been under construction since 2010. Authorities deemed the story insufficient to issue an arrest warrant. Joran continued to communicate with John until May 25th, when he claimed he was going to turn himself in. Instead, he fled to Peru with the extorted money. On June 30th, 2010, a federal grand jury indicted him on charges of wire fraud and extortion. Joran quickly reverted to his old ways after landing in Peru. He approached 21-year-old Stephanie Flores, a university student at the Atlantic City Casino in Lima, Peru. According to security footage, they played poker together for about an hour or two. After Stephanie had cashed in some chips, she left with Joran, heading to a hotel, where he picked up the key to room 309 at around 5 a.m. They were last seen ascending the stairs together, disappearing into the room. By mid-morning on May 30th, 2010, Joran was locked out of his room and called the front desk to be let in. He left 20 minutes later with only a backpack. The television in the room was left on, and he told the receptionist, "Don't disturb my girl," before departing. 2 days later, hotel staff discovered Stephanie's brutally beaten body inside room 309. Stephanie's father, Ricardo Flores, a well-known businessman and former race car driver, brought significant media attention to the case. Joran fled south and was eventually arrested in Chile. He tried to change his appearance, shaving his head and dyeing his hair blonde, discarding most of his belongings except his laptop. The Lima police reported that Joran initially denied the crime, but after 4 days in custody, he confessed to killing Stephanie. He claimed they went to his room to do some online gambling, but she briefly left and returned. When she did, She found information on his laptop linking him to Natalee Holloway's disappearance. This discovery caused her to panic and try to leave the room, which further enraged Duran. In a fit of fury, he killed her. Stephanie had suffered a neck fracture, likely leading to paralysis minutes before her death. The autopsy later revealed she was still conscious when Duran dropped her body to the floor and took a quick shower. Realizing she was still alive, he used his shirt to strangle her to death before fleeing. Duran added one final act of indignity by placing Stephanie's body in a suggestive position before leaving the room. The entire case shocked the public, as it seemed the past was repeating itself with another victim. Duran was charged with first-degree murder and robbery in Peru, along with wire fraud and extortion as charged by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Birmingham, Alabama. His defense lawyer argued that the crime was involuntary manslaughter, but Duran ultimately pleaded guilty to the murder charges. The defense claimed Duran suffered from severe psychological trauma due to the Holloway case. The court sentenced him to 28.5 years in prison in 2012. This was the first victory for the Holloway family after years of trauma and agony. Beth Holloway visited Duran in the prison where he was held in September 2010. A Dutch documentary team provided a glimpse into how Duran survived in one of the harshest prisons in the world. Beth described the moment as liberating, stating that Duran's imprisonment was the culmination of her 5-year struggle. His incarceration marked a turning point for the victims' families, allowing them to move forward with their lives. In July 2014, Duran was set to marry his pregnant fiancée, Lydie Figueroa. Lydie told a local news outlet that she met Duran in 2010 while visiting another inmate with her cousin. Conjugal visits were permitted at the maximum security prison in northern Lima, where Duran spent the first years of his sentence. According to Lydie, her future husband had transformed into a new person. In August, Duran was transferred to another prison in the Andes Mountains, known for its harsher conditions, after allegedly threatening to kill the director of the previous prison. Lydie, who gave birth to a daughter in September, later claimed that Duran had been stabbed by a cellmate. These accusations were later denied by the director of Peru's National Penitentiary Institute, who called her a compulsive liar. In a 2015 interview, Lydie provided Fox News Latino with a letter Duran had written from prison, in which he alleged that Stephanie's father had put a $10,000 bounty on his head. "I don't want to die," he wrote. By this point, both the authorities and media knew that Duran was a compulsive liar and a sociopath, but the severity of his crimes and his refusal to show any signs of remorse, guilt, or fear only highlighted his manipulative nature. In June 2023, Duran was extradited to Birmingham, Alabama, to face extortion charges in federal court, where he initially pleaded not guilty. Later, in October, he changed his plea and confessed to killing Natalee as part of a plea deal, which resulted in a 20-year sentence for wire fraud and extortion, to be served concurrently with his ongoing sentence in Peru. Duran finally admitted to the chilling events of May 29, 2005, the night of Natalee's disappearance. According to him, the Calpo brothers dropped them off at the beach. Natalee began feeling ill, and Duran claimed she kissed him briefly. But when he made further advances, she rejected him and kneed him in the groin. In response, Duran angrily kicked her in the head and then picked up a cinder block, the same one he said he found on the beach, and smashed her head with it. He then dragged Natalee's body into the ocean. The statute of limitations for filing murder charges in Aruba is 12 years. A spokesperson for the island's prosecutors requested that the U.S. Department of Justice provide its office with Duran's files before deciding on any prosecutorial steps. Natalie Holloway's case remains open in Aruba and has become one of the most famous missing person cases in the U.S. Losing a family member in foreign lands forever and witnessing the horrifying events that unfolded has surpassed any conceivable terror. Whether it was the laxity of the Aruba Police Department or the actions of those associated with Duran, all had a role in the disappearance of Natalie, a bright pre-med student who lost her life far too soon due to negligence. This case has raised many questions about law enforcement, the media, and society as a whole. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.